Hello, my friends. I hope you're doing well. Today is the 17th of March 2025, and this is your update from Syria. One of the things that, in my opinion, my humble opinion, many of the pundits on Syria miss is context and history. And I'm not here to claim that I know better, but I lived in the region most of my life. And I lived through the experiences and the events that the people in the region have passed through. But I was also privileged and lucky to study international relations and diplomacy. I also studied political science, but mostly I was very much interested in politics. Therefore, I spent a lot of time watching news outlets, analysis, commentaries, debates between different personalities since I was very young. And this probably established something in me, which is noticing patterns or trying to connect the events with each other. For example, today when we see a news that the HTS or Nusra al-Qaeda fighters have attacked Lebanon, some people may think this is just a coincidence or an incident that has nothing to do with the previous events, which is untrue. Those who focused and monitored the region well know that the project to destabilize and do regime change in Syria is interconnected with Syria's alliances in the region. Now, Syria has a very unique and important position in West Asia or the Middle East, but its alliances and ties to or with Iran, Hezbollah in the region, and also with some of the Palestinian factions, have made Syria in a position which is targeted by the US and Israel nonstop. Now, if we go back a little bit in history to understand what is happening today and why al-Julani's gangs are attacking Lebanon, we have to go a little bit, 20 years probably, in history to see what happened with the invasion of Iraq and what was the project of the US in the region after the invasion and occupation of Iraq, which is to try to persuade Syria through diplomatic means, economic means, and sometimes political pressure and sanctions to abandon its allies, especially in Iran and Hezbollah. So in 2003, when Iraq was occupied by the US, the Secretary of State back then of the US came to Syria and he sat with President Bashar al-Assad and he told him, look, the economic reforms you are doing in the country are fine and perfect. Basically, you're opening up the economy to the outside world, but that is not enough. We are expecting from you to reorient Syria's geopolitical position from this so-called axis of resistance into the moderate Arab camp. And the moderate Arab camp is Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, etc. The countries which already normalize relations with Israel, whether tacitly or in public. And Assad rejected that, rejected to cut the supply chains to Hezbollah, rejected to abandon the Palestinian factions in Damascus, and this has made him the main target for the US. So in 2004, there has been a lot of talk about the Syrian presence in Lebanon. All of a sudden, this topic has become a priority for the US, France, Israel, etc. So they wanted to kick the Syrian forces out of Lebanon, which Syria, through Lebanon, can establish a certain leverage not only over Lebanon, but also over Israel, because now many of the sensitive locations in Syria, military locations, were protected by the Syrian air defenses inside Lebanon and not only inside Syria. So Syria had a big network of air defenses in both countries. So they want to kick the Syrian forces out. And it is quite difficult to force Syria to leave without internal pressure inside Lebanon. So here comes the intelligence role, basically. And in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, of course, I might be correct or I might be wrong, but I believe in this theory, and that is foreign powers assassinated the former prime minister of Lebanon. Who is this foreign intelligence? I cannot really determine exactly who was, but I could also see who benefited from the assassination and who capitalized on the assassination and who managed to have a stronger grip over Lebanon after the assassination of the Prime Minister, Rafiq al-Hariri, who had good relationship with France, also had a good relationship in Syria. It's not like they were enemies, but Rafiq al-Hariri has been a very important political figure in Lebanon and especially among the Sunni Muslims. And since the anti-Syria camp, let's say, want to kick the Syrian forces out of Lebanon, they have, in my opinion, assassinated the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, Rafiq al-Hariri, in order to turn the Lebanese public against the Syrian army presence inside Lebanon. And true enough, once the assassination happened, all the major mainstream media outlets, politicians, even in the Arabic world, like in Al Arabiya or all these Al Hurra and other TV outlets which either belong to Saudi Arabia or Qatar or the Americans, they have all accused Syria and Assad for the assassination. So this created a huge negative sentiments inside Lebanon, and here comes the role of the US Embassy, which is to trigger a color revolution. And this has happened. It was called the Syria Revolution against the Syrian presence inside Lebanon, and Syria came under immense pressure to withdraw from Lebanon, which they did, leaving many of their heavy weaponry in the hands of Hezbollah. So this was in 2005. In 2006, Israel and the US declared that they're going to establish a new Middle East, and this is going to happen through Lebanon, which means Israel goes into war against Hezbollah after kicking the Syrian forces out of Lebanon. They thought that they can destroy Hezbollah completely, and by doing so, Syria will lose its major ally in the region and its leverage basically over Lebanon and over Israel. So this was the idea, and Israel went into 33 days of war against Hezbollah, and at the end they were forced to leave Lebanon and sign a ceasefire agreement because they couldn't achieve their goals. And this is when Hezbollah declared that they have emerged victorious against Israel, and Syria said, President Bashar and Syria said that they take credit for the victory of Hezbollah against Israel. So from now on, the Israeli focus shifted from Lebanon again into Syria. They thought, again, that Hezbollah is as a local, let's say, armed group, which has lots of bunkers under the ground, and it doesn't have a conventional army, but rather they're fighting street fights, guerrilla warfare, right? And Israeli army is used to fight conventional regular armies. So they thought, like, this time they should come after Syria. And true enough, they have been preparing, Israel, the US, France, Britain, many of the powers, they're preparing for a regime change in Syria. And this has started in 2011. So in 2011, everybody knows the context, everybody knows the history. A so-called revolution started, which was an armed insurgency against the Assad government. And in a matter of 1 year, when you follow the developments and the advancement of the so-called Free Syrian Army, and of course, Al-Nusra Front, the offshoot of Al-Qaeda in Syria, they were focusing a lot on the city of Homs and all the villages around it on the west of Homs, on the borders with Lebanon, especially the city of Qusayr. So, city of Qusayr for Hezbollah was a warning and a red flag that if these FSA Nusra fighters occupy Al-Qusayr, then they will lose one of their major supply chain routes with Lebanon. And in their intelligence information, they knew that once these groups occupy the border crossings with Lebanon, they will block all the supply chains from Syria to Lebanon and they will try to choke Hezbollah, right? So they also knew that if the Syrian regime materializes and succeeds in Syria, then these Nusra ISIS fighters, they will come to Lebanon after Hezbollah because their main ideology is Takfiri and they believe in Ibn Taymiyyah's teachings. Ibn Taymiyyah, he came a few hundred years ago and he gave very radical teachings and interpretation for Islam. And he said basically that fighting against the Alawites and the Shiites is a priority and it comes before fighting the Christians and the Jews. So in their mind, this is a religious war. So Hezbollah knows this and knows that if Assad is gone, they will come after Hezbollah in Lebanon. So they went to Syria to fight them before they come to Lebanon. And this was the main motivation and the main strategic reason why Hezbollah got involved in the Syrian war. And once Hezbollah intervened in 2012, 2013, during this time, Bandar bin Sultan has become the head of the Saudi intelligence back then, national intelligence. He has taken over the file of Syria from Qatar, and he supported Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, and ISIS. He wanted to allocate $2 trillion to oust Assad. They couldn't, but they managed to collect tens of billions of dollars to oust Assad in this case. But during this time, once Bandar bin Sultan came to power, we have witnessed an acceleration of car bombs going into Lebanon. So Hezbollah's assessment here was correct that these militants, they're not only going to occupy Syria, but they're going to come to Lebanon. So the al-Julani gangs and Baghdadi gangs, the leader of Nusra and ISIS, they started sending car bombs to Lebanon. One of the times, which I used to work in Beirut, one of the car bombs exploded 1 kilometer away from my office. So they were sending car bombs like weekly basis into the southern suburbs of Beirut, where it is mostly populated by the Shia Lebanese or the grassroots of Hezbollah. And during this time, many civilians got killed by these car bombs, and this was sent by Jolani and al-Baghdadi. But this was not a coincidence that once Bandar bin Sultan came to lead the intelligence of Saudi Arabia, the car bombs started going to flow to Lebanon. They were all interconnected. Now, after how many years for the regime change operations and everything, they managed to oust Assad. Hezbollah lost its biggest ally in the region and the supply chains and its access to the region. Hezbollah feels isolated in Lebanon, but this has preceded, of course, the October 7, the destruction of Gaza, the decapitation of the Hezbollah leadership completely, and pushing Hezbollah to face now a local Lebanese government which is hostile to Hezbollah. They are pro-Saudi Arabia and pro-the US. So after October 7, many things have changed in the region, one of which is the destruction of Gaza, the starvation of the Palestinian people now in Gaza. Secondly is the decapitation of the leadership of Hezbollah. And nobody can convince me that wasn't a blow for Hezbollah. And now they have to face a hostile Lebanese government which is not protecting its basically Lebanese people against the Israeli attacks, but rather they're asking Hezbollah to disarm, and there is a big media campaigns against them via local Lebanese media outlets. So they're trying to create this clash among the Lebanese. On the same side, Assad is gone. Iran chose the negotiation path with the US and the West. Despite everything they say, it's quite clear in Tehran that they are not in a confrontational position any longer with the US and Israel. And this has created an environment in Syria and Lebanon, and I'm talking about now people whom I talk to, and those are people living in the coastal cities of Syria, or they were pro-Assad, or they are in Lebanon, they were either pro-Hezbollah or they are Shiites, so they're from the environment of Hezbollah, let's say. And they're all telling me that the same thing, that they feel that they were abandoned by Iran. Of course, the same thing goes also for Russia. People are just talking about these things, right? So there is this mistrust now between the people, I'm saying, with Iran. And this puts the region in front of new realities, that Iran is no longer a player which leads an axis of resistance, because in my opinion, the axis of resistance has disintegrated. And I don't believe in the wishful thinking of the people who are trying to sell illusions to you and to the rest of the people, that there is somehow a resistance going to come from the ashes and rise and start fighting against these radical Takfiris in Syria or protect their borders with Israel, etc. No, I don't believe that is going to be the case. And that's why I truly and genuinely hope from the people who are still talking about, oh, we have to continue fighting, do this and that, and they don't even live in Syria, they're not Syrians, and they think that they're giving a service to the people, I would say no. And this is not a defeatist argument. The priority is to save the lives of the people. Without people, there is no resistance. Like, if you're going to talk about resistance, meanwhile the people are getting slaughtered en masse in Latakia, Tartus, Jable, Panias, Homs, Hama, for example, based on their sectarian and ethnic identity, then you are pushing the people in the face of a slaughterhouse, basically, without giving them any means to survive. So I'm receiving comments from people telling me, why did you send a plead or a message to Trump and Tulsi Gabbard? Do you think they're going to respond to you to stop the killing? And I said, look, I don't find any other way for the moment, because the people in charge in the US, they can make a phone call with Erdogan and stop the killings in Syria. Will they do it? I doubt. I'm doing from what I can on my part. But staying silent completely about it is also ridiculous, especially that the people are getting killed every day in mass executions in the streets. So what do you want me to do? Like to stay silent about it? No. So they say, but you are now, like geopolitically speaking, you're doing a disservice to the resistance. I was like, which resistance exactly? There is no resistance in Syria. Of course, there is resistance in Lebanon, but they're not in a confrontational position at the current moment. They are still taking care of their injured. They're studying the results of the war and evaluating the failures that they have faced during this war in order to build up on it. But even if they want to build up on it and try to recover, let's say, from where are they going to receive the weapons? Are you going to tell me from the Mediterranean? It's not going to happen. Lebanon has two borders, Syria and Israel. So from where all the weapons went to Lebanon is through Syria or from Syria. Those were either coming from Iran, passing through Syria, or they were made and manufactured in Syria and sent all spare parts into Lebanon, and Hezbollah has assembled them. Now, as we speak, when we read all this context and history, the al-Julani gangs have attacked Lebanon. And apparently, one of them was from Chechnya, and they tried to steal cattle, basically. And according to Charles Lister, who is the biggest grifter and biggest liar on the Syrian file, who's probably an intelligence asset, and he has been legitimizing and normalizing and polishing all these terrorist groups in Syria for over 13 to 14 years now. He says, serious escalation on Syria's border with Lebanon today. Hezbollah entered Syria, kidnapped 3 interim government soldiers, he doesn't mention one of them was from Chechnya, took them back to Lebanon and executed them, one by stoning on video. This is complete big lie, by the way. The opposite is the truth. It is, in fact, the Al-Qaeda fighters who entered Lebanon to steal cattle. Basically, imagine the desperation. And armed Lebanese clans, basically, for those who don't know, Lebanon is all armed. It's not Hezbollah. Everyone has an arm, basically, in Lebanon, including the clans, including the villagers. And the villagers, they fought against these Nusra Qaeda terrorists, and they killed 3 of them inside Lebanon, and they handed over the bodies to the Lebanese army, which gave it back to Syria or to al-Julani's gangs later. Hezbollah had nothing to do with this. Hezbollah didn't even intervene, didn't even fight in this. But they're accusing Hezbollah because when we see all this context and history, they want for these Al-Qaeda gangs to go to Lebanon and fight against Hezbollah. So why would the US or Israel go into direct war with Hezbollah or wage a ground offensive if you have tens of thousands of brainless, indoctrinated ideologues, brainwashed, complete, like there is no brain here, like these people just act on their anger, on their hatred and their sectarianism and racism. They hate the Shias with their guts. They believe that the Shias should be killed. They believe that Alawites should be killed. And after they kill the Shiites and the Alawites, they believe that they will come after the Christians and the Jews. So their fight is religious. It's sectarian. It's not about political project or geopolitics, occupation, this and that. If it's about occupation, the Israelis have occupied large swaths of territories in Syria bigger than the Gaza Strip, and al-Julani's gangs didn't fire one bullet on Israel to defend themselves. I'm talking about self-defense, right? What does this tell you? In comparison with the enthusiasm and all this, we're going to fight against these Hezbollah Shiites and we will kill them. It just shows you who is behind this Nusra terrorists and these Al-Qaeda terrorists, that they are always boots on the ground for the US strategy in the region. So when J.D. Vance blamed the US and blamed the previous administrations, he was correct. This is the direct result of the CIA involvement in Syria and waging this covert war against Syria through the Operation Timber Sycamore. So now we have a situation where, in my opinion, it's a very hopeless case in Syria, and I send a message to Tulsi Gabbard and Trump just to make a phone call to stop the killing, because my priority is the people. The survival of the people comes before any other geopolitical fantasies in the eyes or in the minds of people, especially those who don't live in Syria. One final thing I want to mention, and that is the foreign minister of al-Julani, Ahmed Shibani. his name is Ahmed Jinbani. He landed in Brussels today. And in my opinion, this is an absolute disgrace for the EU to roll out a red carpet for a man representing a sectarian regime that is systematically slaughtering Syrian Alawites and Syrian Christians. And rumors claim that Qatar pressed the EU Commission into keeping the invitation intact even after these horrific massacres, all documented on video. And this is just like, what can I say about it? It's a shame. It's a big shame. Like a shame on the EU for this betrayal of its so-called values. Because they say this is a value-based politics, right? This is something like we are the moral people, we have values, and we have to champion the value-based policies, which means our policies are all based on values. I don't know what to say about this, seriously. Finally, it is rumored that Abu Muhammad al-Julani, this self-selected president of Syria, has been interviewed by the Israeli Yadda'ut Ahronot newspaper, and this is going to come soon, to be published soon. The interviewer, his name is Mahdi Majid. It seems he's Syrian, but he's pro-Israel, and he has done the interview. And some of the rumors say that Jolani said like they don't want to fight any longer against Israel, but we have to wait and see what's going to be the content of that interview. I'm going to come, of course, and cover it and analyze it for you. So this was all for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today was the 17th of March 2025. And on Tuesday, I'm going to do another update video for you. I'm trying to keep the video shorter for you. You're liking it more. More people are watching it, so I will keep it shorter. Usually I am doing live streamings, but from now on I decided that I will continue doing live streamings when I have a guest, which I can interview. Again, probably 40-45 minutes maximum. And the rest are going to be, when it is solo, it's going to be shorter videos like this. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Peace be upon the Syrian people. Salam.